Welcome to Chapter 14.3, European Footholds in South and Southeastern Asia. After Vasco da Gama's voyage to India, the Portuguese, under the command of Alfonso de Albuquerque, burst into the Indian Ocean. But then Muslim rulers had already established the Mughal Empire throughout much of India. The Portuguese gained footholds in southern India by promising local princes aid against other European rulers. And in 1510, the Portuguese seized the island of Goa, off the coast of India, and then they took Malacca. In less than 50 years, the Portuguese built a trading empire with military and merchant outposts. For most of the 1500s, they controlled the spice trade between Europe and Asia. The Dutch challenged Portuguese domination of Asian trade, and in 1599 the Dutch fleet from Asia returned with a cargo of spices. Soon after, Dutch warships and trading vessels made the Netherlands a leader in European commerce. The Dutch set up colonies and trading posts around the world, including their strategic settlement at Cape Town. Cape Town's location gave the Dutch a secure presence in the region, and in 1602 a group of wealthy Dutch merchants formed the Dutch East India Company, which had full sovereign powers. With its power to build armies, wage war, negotiate peace treaties, and govern overseas territories, the Dutch East India Company dominated Southeast Asian trade and governance. Meanwhile, Spain took over the Philippines, which became a key link in the Spanish colonial empire. India was the center of a valuable spice trade. The Mughal Empire was larger, richer, and more powerful than any kingdom in Europe. And when the Europeans sought trading rights, the Mughal emperors saw no threat in granting them. And so the Portuguese, and later the Dutch and British and French, were permitted to build forts and warehouses in coastal towns. Over time, the Mughal Empire weakened, and the French and British traders fought for power. Like the Dutch, both British and French had established East India Companies themselves, and each nation's trading company organized its own army of Indian troops, which they called sepoys. By the late 1700s, however, the British East India Company controlled most of India. In 1510, the Portuguese established a port on the island of Goa, which is just off the tip of the Indian subcontinent, in the Arabian Sea. And as their headquarters, it became a policy that they were going to sweep piracy and terrorism out of the Arabian Sea and the Indian Sea. This meant that most of the Muslim traders that were going back and forth between those throughout the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea were terrorized by the Portuguese. And the Portuguese historian Barreiros attempted to justify Portugal's seizure of commercial traffic that the Muslims had long dominated. He says, "It is true that there does exist a common right to for all to navigate the seas, and in Europe we do recognize that right which others hold against us, but the right does not extend beyond Europe, and therefore the Portuguese, as lords of the seas, are justified in confiscating the goods of all those who navigate the seas without their permission." So basically, Western principles of international law did not apply to Asia or Asians. But for almost a century, the Portuguese controlled the spice trade over the Indian Ocean. The Dutch Empire was built on spices. In 1599, a Dutch fleet returned to Amsterdam, carrying about 600,000 pounds of pepper and 250,000 pounds of cloves and nutmeg. Those who had invested in the expedition received 100% profit, and the voyage led to the establishment in 1602 of the Dutch East India Company, which was founded with the stated intention of capturing the spice trade from the Portuguese. The Dutch fleet sailed from the Cape of Good Hope and, avoiding the Portuguese forts in India, steered directly for the Sunda Straits in Indonesia. The Dutch wanted direct access to and control of the Indonesian islands, which were the source of these spices. And in return for helping the Indonesian princes in local squabbles and disputes with the Portuguese, the Dutch won a lot of commercial concessions. So they either won through agreement or seizure or just basically war the access that they wanted to the Indonesian islands. And eventually, they became the dominant and only European country that controlled that area. The Indonesians wanted the European manufactured goods like armor and firearms and linen and even toys. So the Dutch created a very lucrative spice trade, going directly from Indonesia through the Cape of Africa all the way up to the Netherlands. This profit that they received from this kind of trade enabled them to fund the Renaissance that they were experiencing at that same time. And many of the famous artists and musicians found a home and an audience in the Netherlands because they had the wealth to invest in the arts. The first contact that the Philippines had with Europeans was when Magellan landed in 1522 and was killed on one of the smaller islands in the southern part of the Philippines. But it wasn't actually conquered until the 1560s and named the Philippines after Philip II of Spain. Because the Filipinos were not united, they were easily overcome, and the Spanish were much more interested in converting the Filipinos than they had been in other areas that they had conquered. And so they sent missionaries to convert most of the population to Catholic Christianity. The Philippines were part of a triangle of trade. In Mexico, Spain had huge silver mines, which they then used. They transported the silver to the Philippines, and it was used to trade with China. China didn't want any of the European manufactured goods. All they really wanted was gold or silver. So in this way, silver from the Americas went into the Asian economy. The scent of fabulous profits attracted all the other Europeans to India, to the Mughal Empire. And the Mughal Empire at this point was much more wealthy than any of the other European countries. The Mughal Empire was a center of trade in textiles like silk or cotton, and they had huge amounts of wealth. In fact, there is a peacock throne that was built by the founder of the Mughal Empire that was worth about $5 million. $5 million today, which took them 7 years to build and took all the profits of their trade industry. So it just shows you the amount of wealth that the rulers were able to spend on luxury goods. And these little European colonies or traders that wanted to set up colonies on the outskirts or on the shores of India didn't bother the Mughal Empire at all. They just allowed them to come in and do what they wanted to do, for a small fee, of course. And the first European power that was working in India were the Portuguese, but later on the Dutch took over and kicked the Portuguese out, and then after the Dutch came, the British and the French also rivaled to set up their own trade colonies and trading ports around the edges of the Mughal Empire. 80 London merchants, organized the British East India Company, and their objective was an Indian spice and cotton trade. And the emperor of the Mughal Empire at that point, Jahangir, granted the British permission to create a concession at the port of Surat, which is on the west coast of India. They were able to get this permission because of all the bribes and the medical service and the gifts that they gave to the Indian rulers and the bureaucracy in order to oil the wheels and get it organized. Fort St. George on the east coast, which they founded, later became the city of Madras, and in 1668, the city of Bombay was given to India when the Portuguese Princess Catherine of Braganza married King Charles II of England. And it was basically leased to the company, making it basically a British port in India. In 1690, another company official founded a fort that became known as the city of Calcutta, and these three places later became centers of British trade and imperialism. So Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta were all developed by the British to be trading ports for the British East India Company.